Welcome back to Next Gen Console Watch, our show following all the news on the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. I'm Daemon Hatfield, and as always, I'm joined by Jonathon Dornbush, host of IGN's PlayStation podcast, Podcast Beyond.
Beyond. Hey, Damon.
And also joining us this week is Kat Bailey, one of IGN's news reporters and a co-host of our Nintendo podcast, Nintendo Voice Chat.
Hi, it's me, Kat Bailey, co-host of Nintendo Voice Chat, where our Next Gen Console Watch never ends.
It's true. We're still waiting on that Switch Pro.
Oh, yeah.
But today we're talking about user experiences, particularly on PS5 and Xbox Series X. You probably heard the news this week that PlayStation is sunsetting a feature called PS5 Accolades. Everyone who reported it made the same easy jokes about their sunsetting a feature no one has ever heard of. But Jonathon, Accolades was meant to be a way for players to give each other kudos for good behavior in multiplayer games. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and I guess it must not have received enough accolades itself because, it was there from launch, but not something that I ever saw used very much. Granted, I only played a few multiplayer games at launch and kind of stuck to the same ones. But yeah, that was primarily its function, and I really only saw it in a game or two and haven't heard anyone really talk about it since launch.
PS5 Accolades, gone too soon. And when we were planning the topics for this week's episode, we got to talking about the UIs, the dashboards of both consoles, and I think we all agree that they're fine, not perfect by any means. And I don't know, maybe it's time to sort of think about redesigning the UIs, the dashboards for both the PS5 and Series X. Starting with PS5, Jonathon, they introduced what Game Hub, I think is what they call it on PS5, where you turn on your console, your most recently played games are all at the top, and each one has like a hub that can include any sorts of information. You'll get to see your trophies that you've achieved and have yet to unlock. Then there might be an official news section. There'll be latest videos that have been captured from the community, add-ons that are possible to download. But it's different for each game. A game like Stray, which is recent and a lot of people are playing, there's a lot of these different information available for it. But I've also been playing the Capcom Beat 'em Up collection, and I'm probably the only person on earth that's playing that on PS5 right now, because in that game's Game Hub, there's just nothing except the trophies. So Jonathon, almost 2 years into the life of the PlayStation 5, what do you think about that console's dashboard?
It's a weird one. I think you summed it up well at the beginning, is that like at the end of the day, I think both consoles and most consoles in general do some things right and a lot of things not right. And there's always improvements to be made. I will say PlayStation's been pretty good at, they've been making updates. There are betas that they put the console UI through, and then they officially put these things out for the rest of the audience. But on the whole, it's the system I use the most. So I'd say I've become most comfortable with using it and have maybe gotten around some of its eccentricities, but I think it almost favored maybe form over function in a lot of ways. It really likes these splash pages for the games, and that's really the big part of it. Is each game, as you were saying, has its really big page, and I think there's something to that from a aesthetic choice. If you get this big splash page, you maybe get music that is keyed to it. It allows that game to get the focus, but for a player, you may not really need that or want that, and I think what players want is more flexibility with how it works, the ability to change things around a little bit more. Obviously, I think a thing people miss from the PS4 generation is obviously still themes and ways to make it feel a little bit more personal. But it's something that I think for jumping into a game or jumping into a media app, it's pretty simple enough to use, and I think they've been improving the player base aspect of it, which is how you get into group chats and communities and things like that. I think that has gotten better over time, but it's clear that in their decision to kind of overhaul it completely from the PS4 generation, they took a few steps back as well, and I hope it's something they continue to work on, because it's easy to get into a game, but to do much else, it can be a little bit cumbersome for sure.
I split my time pretty evenly between my PS5 and Series X, and I do think I slightly prefer the PS5 dashboard. But Kat, what are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, can I talk about how strange it is that themes aren't really a thing on any of the platforms? Because they were much more of a thing on Nintendo 3DS, on the PlayStation 5, Xbox 360, and it seems like an easy moneymaker, right? Yeah. I mean, you make a nice and stylized theme that people can download, maybe let people upload their own custom themes for a certain amount of money, and you rake in the money, but it must not be going over particularly well because pretty much nobody does it at this point, and I really miss it. honestly.
Yeah, it's a weird one. You got to assume if it was making money, they would have kept doing it, but I guess people weren't buying them. But yeah, it's a weird
Or
one.
it's too much of a hassle
Maybe.
or something like that. But it's too bad because I had a really cool Valkyria Chronicles theme on my PlayStation 4, and I feel like the theme that somebody would use on their PS4 or something would really tell you a lot about them, like what their favorite games were and everything. I don't know. I think that the current dashboards are too sterile. What do you think?
Yeah, I think sterile is a good way to put it. They feel very like clinical. They get the job done, but there's not much to it that makes it feel like it's an interactive experience.
They're tech.
Sterile is a good word, I think, to describe, especially the Xbox Series X dashboard. I appreciate the fact that the Xbox feels a lot snappier to me than my PS5. I turn that console on and I'm almost immediately into my game. Still, it takes a little bit more time to get into it on PS5. But I like, as Jonathan was saying, the big splash pages for each game on PS5, whereas there's nothing like that over on Xbox, I don't think. It just seems like a little bit cold and just basic. It's just like a basic, like here's your most recently played games, here's the store. There's not like, really colorful, attractive splash animation that comes up for each game that I'm focusing on. Kat, what do you think, what would you prefer to see on the Xbox side for a dashboard?
Well, this is what I'll say as the representative of Team Green today, I guess. I think it does a really good job of highlighting Game Pass, which is obviously the big appeal of the Xbox this generation. And I have a really easy time being able to see what's new, seeing the collage of games that I can download is really appealing to me, and I can go, oh, that's new, I want to download that. And so you're almost going through a supermarket, just wanting to pick all of them out and everything. So I have a really easy time navigating that part of the Xbox experience. I have a really hard time with a couple items on the dashboard of the Xbox. One is being able to get friend notifications or invites into multiplayer games. We were just having this experience not too long ago, and I was like, well, where's the invite? Oh my gosh, you have to open a couple of different menus to look at the very bottom to find the invite that will get you into a game. And it's been a problem since the Xbox One and everything. Also, it's still kind of a pain to be able to capture stuff on the Xbox Series X. It's gotten a bit better over time, but it's still buried under too many menus. And actually, on the PS5 as well, I would say the capture experience has gotten worse since the PlayStation 4. What is up with that?
I think they were trying to go for more functionality, whereas the simplicity of the share on PS4, I think, allowed for it to be so easy to use. I think, prefer getting shares and captures on the PS5 side of it, but yeah, there's still a little bit now more cumbersome stuff to it. The easiest way to get things is to actually now it took months into the PS5's life or even over a year or so, but you weren't able to download your captures on your phone until they released an update for it, and they finally were able to do that. Otherwise, you had to essentially either tweet it out to the world and hope your capture looked okay, or the workaround was that you would message a friend your capture so you could then download it on your phone. There's all those little bits and pieces, I think, that both consoles sort of, I guess, maybe lose in the big picture of what they're trying to get across. Like you said, Game Pass is first and foremost there, and I think that works really well. I think for PlayStation, they want the game you're focused on to be your perspective, and it does that pretty well. But beyond that, all the little bits and pieces, I think, still need to be worked out.
I would like to rewind briefly to the launch of the PlayStation 5, which I'm sure you remember very well, and how we didn't even really know what the PS5 UI looked like until a couple months before launch?
Maybe a month or two before they put out a video breakdown of it. Yeah, because PlayStation this generation decided to do a big overhaul, whereas Xbox bridged the gap and made it so that what you were experiencing on Xbox One was very similar to what you'd experience on the series.
There were a lot of rumors floating around at the time that the PS5 UI was coming together very quickly, coming in hot, as it were. And you can sort of feel kind of feel that because it feels a little ramshackle. There's always too many clicks to get to different things. The strange PS3, PS4 hybrid thing going on with the sort of XMB-like click. Yeah, it's very strange.
They're
too many clicks to turn off.
Yeah, they're trying to pack a lot in. Yeah, I mean, I think that was the poster child for the PS5 UI, and the feature set of it was they flipped the hold versus press buttons to turn off the system on your controller versus what it was on the PS4. And there was just no reason to do that after you train people for 8 years to use a system a certain way. So yeah, It's interesting to be, as you were saying, Damon, like 2 years in, and we're still figuring out what probably should have been a little bit there at the start.
And I play a lot of Madden, and I'm going to be playing Madden this year. And one of the things that always stands out to me is the reason the UI in that game looks really kind of not great, very sterile, is because they get engineers to make it. And they're always thinking in terms of like functionality, just like whatever. I don't care like how pretty it looks and everything. And not enough emphasis on kind of the UI, UX. And I'm wondering if that's what's happening, especially with the Xbox, but maybe also to an extent with the PS5.
Yeah.
Well, Kat, while we have you here, I need to get your thoughts on the Nintendo Switch dashboard.
Oh gosh, I don't hate it in some ways because I turn on my Switch, there are the games that I play, I go right into the games, we're okay. Still don't have a voice chat, ironically, like the Nintendo voice chat name was chosen ironically and it still holds, it's very funny. I do like the experience of being able to go in and choose whichever game, all the games on my system. I would like more stats. Like I would like to have a greater feel for like how much I'm playing, like, and everything. That's there on the Nintendo Switch. It's kind of hard to find sometimes. There's this weird hub thing that they introduced for all of the retro games because they were kind of hiding each individual Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Genesis, they were hiding them into their little apps. So it was easy to forget that you had them, which is a big part of the Nintendo Switch Online experience. And we'll get to the PlayStation Plus experience in a hot second, I think. But then they created this big, ungainly hub thing that I never use. And I think they could do a lot better job of kind of integrating that. I think, so we were playing a lot of Shredder's Revenge. The multiplayer lobbies for that are still frustrating. The online experience for the Nintendo Switch is still frustrating. And as we were talking about themes, what is going on with that? Because Nintendo 3DS had them. They were great. Why would you get rid of those? Well, we do have folders now.
Yeah. And we're just about to get folders as well, sort of.
Hooray. Hooray for folders.
Tell us about folders, Jonathan. They're coming to PS5?
Yeah, so in the current, I believe it's running in beta, but in addition to a few other features, they are sort of introducing folders. They're calling them game lists, not just folders. And essentially, not on your main dashboard page of the PS5 as you would go across the games, but if you go over to your collection of games, sort of at the end of that, and you click in there, you'll be able to have, I believe it's 10 folders or so, and each can have, up to 100 games. So you'll be able to make folders in there. Which is good because the organization for your collection of games, you can only sort of sort by a few things. You can't search it properly. You have to just sort by like default of like newest to oldest or alphabetical or things like that. So the game lists are, I think, a good way to sort of get closer to it for people who like to organize like that. But you can't then, as of now, I believe, put those on sort of the main PS5 UI area. They're locked to the collection side.
Let's talk about that PlayStation Plus experience. Sony just overhauled all new PlayStation Plus, but I think there's work to be done in that user interface in particular. I think Xbox and Game Pass does a much better job of surfacing a bunch of different games, recommending games based on games you've played in the past, based on family-friendly titles, games that have local co-op, that sort of thing, whereas over on PlayStation Plus, it's a little bit of a mess. It's just kind of like, here's all of our games. What do you want to play? I don't know. What do you think, Jonathan?
Yeah, it feels essentially like a duplicate of the PSN store page, and then just kind of put up with the PS Plus iconography and all the sort of bells and whistles of that formatting. But yeah, it's pretty much just that. It's the lists. There's even this weird thing on the splash page where I think a couple of the main choices either have the same wording for like choose this game's catalog or this game's catalog, and it doesn't really tell you what the difference is until you click in. Obviously, if you're a premium member, you can access the classics catalog as well, but it's not sort of built around real discoverability through those deeper catalogs. It will sort of give, I think, like almost like the most played and then the most recent you can kind of sort by, but that's really it for it. There was, to their credit, at the launch of the PS5, the PSN store is so much easier to get to and press into than it was on the PS4. Like the PS4 essentially had to load into like a web page to get you into the store. Here it's built into the console, and it's much easier to use that way. And so it's better in that regard. It is snappier to get into, but I don't think it At least right now, and maybe it's just because it's early days, I don't think it does enough to surface what are 700 games that you can choose from beyond the 10 obvious ones that someone probably wants to play. I think it hopefully can learn about your experiences and what you're gravitating toward and surface recommendations for things or more genre detail and get into things more like publisher dev based stuff. It's a bit bare bones right now for sure.
Yeah, I'd really appreciate being able to sort more granularly, sort the game collection by time it takes to beat. Right? If I just feel like playing a short game, just show me the games that are only going to, sort them by the shortest games to the longest games. Just that sort of thing. Sort them by games developed in Japan, that sort of thing.
Yeah, there's a friend of mine pointed me to, like fan-made things, which are great resources in this case, but it is one of those things where for the PS Plus Extra catalog, there are multiple websites where you can sort that entire library by the trophy difficulty according to some of the trophy websites, or how long it might take to get the Platinum Trophy. And obviously some of that is subjective content, but it would be great for them to start to integrate some ideas like that into this, because that's what people care about. That's why those sites exist.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. I think leaning into that particular part of the culture, especially on PlayStation, would be really beneficial for them. And I'm kind of surprised that they haven't done it because it's been around for quite a while at this point.
Yeah, in terms of like trophy, like on hardware trophy information, the really only thing you get is the percentage completion of players, and that's really the only sort of metric you get from them while playing.
And that's strange. It's almost like PlayStation and maybe even to an extent Xbox now are almost embarrassed by trophies or achievements because, of course, PlayStation took a long time to integrate trophies initially into the PlayStation 3, and they're still there and they have a very vibrant community around them, as we've seen even on Beyond, but they're not emphasized on the platforms themselves in a way that you would kind of expect.
Yeah, at the very least, it was that weird thing of a big, talking about PS5 updating things. At least the UI, when they launched the PS5, getting trophies and looking at them and organizing them was bad. The PS4 had a very great organizational list, and so they essentially reverted to that because no one liked the way they were at the start. And so, yeah, it's something I would love to see them, I think, integrate a little bit more into the experience.
And I think that it maybe gets to the heart of these games are just like, okay, this system will get you into a game and help you buy a game, and that's it. But I almost feel like during the Xbox 360 and the PS3 era, these dashboards were better at being social hubs, and especially on the Xbox 360. And those social features have been downplayed a lot over the years. I don't know if that's because Twitter and Instagram and stuff kind of took their place, but I think it's kind of too bad because I do like feeling like I can go into my console and there's my group of friends and I'm seeing all the stuff that's happening around them, and I have a degree of personality and stats in these platforms that I just feel like they've gotten lost over the years.
So pros and cons to the dashboard and UIs of each system, but I think we can agree that all of these systems have room for improvement. Now, Jonathan, you weren't with us last week, so you missed us talking about PSVR 2 and sort of discussing what that might cost, considering the fact that the MetaQuest 2 is actually having its price increased by $100.
Yeah.
We had the results of last week's poll. We asked, how much are you willing to pay for a PSVR 2, and the winning result was $300. Nearly 60% of the vote, far and away the largest voting group there. Jonathan, is there any way in heck PSVR 2 comes in at $300?
I would love it. If there is any hope, I would stake everything behind it and wish. I don't think so. I think especially with the tech involving 2 new controllers that you'll have to buy as well that integrate their DualSense technology, the headset itself being much more advanced for them, and as far as we know, being very competitive on the VR market. I don't foresee that unless they're really willing to take a loss on it, but it's something that they do know is only going to be for a fraction of the audience, and that fraction is probably willing to commit a little more money. My hope is that it's 400, somewhere in the 400 range. I think the second you get to a peripheral for the console costing as much as the console itself, it becomes a much harder ask, even for the dedicated audience, as you get closer to 500. But especially with the way the economy is right now, parts and all of that, I wouldn't be surprised if we see it to that higher end, but I think a 400 number would probably be best for it, but who's to say?
Kat, what's your best guess for the cost of the PSVR 2?
I think you're right. I think it's going to be too expensive, and they are totally going to PlayStation Vita that thing. They're going to release it. It's not going to have enough games, and it's going to be a problem.
I hope not. But.
Because we're already moving away from wired style play. Okay, I had a kind of a discussion about this with Taylor Lyles, and she was like, yeah, like the PSVR 2 offers a lot of interesting opportunities for VR development with haptics and better screen and everything. And I'm like, yes, all of that is true. And I think the hobbyists will enjoy it, but also it's kind of in this weird middle ground where it's not accessible enough in the sense of the MetaQuest, but it's not flexible enough like you would get on PC. So where does this fall, I suppose? Will the average PlayStation 5 owner be willing to shell out for this? I don't know.
I mean, the average PlayStation player didn't show up for the first PSVR, so.
Did they? I don't know. Do we have sales data for that one?
The attach rate is around 5%.
Oh, wow.
PSVR.
Okay, that's pretty low.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll be lower with PSVR 2.
Yeah. When we can play PSVR 2 and how much it will cost us will continue to be two of the biggest questions we follow on this show. Before we go, we have a poll for you to vote on for next week. Which of these systems, UIs, and dashboards do you prefer? PS5, Xbox Series X and X, or Nintendo Switch? Make sure to vote at IGN.com. We'll share the results with you next episode. And that's going to do it for this episode of Next Gen Console Watch. Thank you to both Jonathan and Kat. Thank you to everyone working behind the scenes in both of our LA and SF studios to make this possible. We'll be back next Friday, 6 a.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Eastern, with more PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X, maybe Nintendo Switch, and VR news. We'll see you then.